Welcome to Masters of Product Management, a show that gives you real-world techniques, cutting-edge strategies, and extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers. Now, here's the master himself, Stephen Haynes.
Welcome back, everyone. Today is a day I want to talk about mobility. And here's the derivation of this, because I live in an extremely mobile city. I live in New York. And listen, I'm sure you see this in any city or in any town that you live in. People are on their devices all the time. And you know, maybe even from a more humorous standpoint, I see people like almost walk into traffic and almost get hit by buses. And I've seen people walk into buildings and almost fall downstairs. And that's fine, right? But there's something having to do with how are people doing what they do and how are they using devices? And so then I got into this state where I was using this. I have two bank accounts. One is sort of my traditional bank checking account, and one is this online savings account. So I was on my phone and, of course, trying to navigate to do something in the traditional bank app, which is not bad, but I got confused and I got lost. And, of course, I'm walking down the street trying to get stuff done. And I was thinking about what a crappy experience I was having. And then I logged into the other bank app that was sleek and swift and easy, and I got it done. And it really points to this thing that, you know, there are lots of people who have, we as customers have great experiences and a lot more not so good experiences. So think about all of those things within the context of what I want to talk about today. So if you're the company that's building an app, you have a lot to think about. And some of those things, including like my own, like the attention span of the user, what our state of mind is at any point in time. And so if we understand that user need states or motivations are so transient in their mobile states, it's really an interesting target for product managers to think about, right? Because this is not a customer who is in a static state. It's a customer or a user who is in a very dynamic state. And so I recently had the pleasure to talk with Kabir Bedi, who is a product manager at Amazon. And he's actually a senior product manager at Amazon. And he's working on Amazon's mobile shopping apps on iPhone and Android. And he's worked a lot on navigation and voice features in the app in the past, and on shopping features for Kindle tablets and Fire TV. And he's also worked in with derivatives and valuation at Ernst & Young, and worked in marketing at Google, and so on and so forth. And as a graduate of the Wharton School, which is a wonderful university not far from here in New York City. So at any rate, Kabir, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So when we were talking about this whole mobility phenomenon, and it really was an outstanding set of conversations that we had, we were just talking about the basic constructs of the market and what product managers, you know, have to deal with, you know, in this space. So could you just sort of encapsulate what's going on in this space?
Sure. Yes. So the smartphone or the mobile phone market really took off in early 2007 when, on the 9th of January, the iPhone was released. And since then, the growth and importance of mobile technology has been rapid. You know, to give you some context, in 2006, there were smartphones. We did have the Palm Pilot and the BlackBerry. And back then, 68 million devices were sold in that year, as compared to 239 million PCs worldwide. Take that forward 10 years, and in 2016, you had 1.7 billion smartphones that were sold, as compared to 269 million PCs. So the rate of growth of mobile sales has just been astronomical. That same behavior is also getting reflected in actually internet advertising. For the first time in 2016, mobile comprised over 50% of internet advertising spend in the US. And the interesting phenomenon that has happened in the last decade is that voice usage on mobile phones has increased, but only marginally. And the biggest increase has been in data consumption. That has seen the hockey stick increase. Smartphones are computing devices. People are using them as their computers in their pockets. And while the biggest sectors that have seen changes have been media, content consumption, streaming of video and music, gaming, social, and e-commerce, but virtually all sectors have really benefited. You gave an example of banking and finance. So where we are today is, I think, mobile devices have become our closest companions. It's often the first device we reach out to. It is normally at arm's length. And hence, I think it's important for all businesses, companies, product managers, and technologists to think about how mobile fits and evolves their business models.
Those are pretty broad statements in terms of overall market movement, and I think that we as users validate what you say every day in terms of, it's the first device we reach for, it's what we're using when we're walking around, it's what we're doing before we go to sleep at night. But when we talk about
Absolutely.
we talk about what the product managers think about. At the purest sense, we're always trying to think about customers, okay? And what are customers trying to do? But how should they think about this? I mean, people may be in traditional business. So I want to talk about, from the product manager standpoint, how should they be thinking about mobile applications and understanding customer problems and challenges, even the way I have them? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yes. And I think let me break down the my response in two ways that we'd actually look at mobile from two dimensions. One is to leverage the unique capabilities of mobile devices. Mobile phones provide some technology that is not available elsewhere. For example, location, camera, voice interfaces. And those have become increasingly popular. And then the other dimension is understanding the mental state of a mobile user, which tends to be more fickle and transient, and how you can design experiences and apps that fit into that mental state of mind. So, talking about the first one around unique capabilities, location is very commonly used by Google Maps and Yelp to give you recommendations. But there have been more interesting innovations around location as well. For example, Uber and Foursquare have partnered to provide customers location-based offers that incorporate the location, route, and destination from Uber, and cafes and restaurants and cash offers from Foursquare. And so there you have an example of where you have a new innovation using an existing technology of location. Similarly, when it comes to voice recognition accuracy continues to improve, and I believe last year became very close to that of human accuracy. And from what I read, over 20% of mobile queries are now happening with voice. So that's
I wish they would be. I wish they would be accurate for me, because some of the words that get interpreted are pretty weird.
But if you actually ask around and you see people's behavior, a lot of people now use voice to type out their text messages or type out their emails when they're walking. And so people are increasingly trusting voice. And then the third one is also camera. Camera, there is so much room for innovation when it comes to augmented reality. Just to give you one example, Lowe's, the retailer, partnered with Google to launch a new app called the Lowe's Vision. And that helps customers find their way around the Lowe's store using augmented reality built on the phone's camera. And so there is a lot of room for innovation in these core foundational technologies that are really unique to mobile. So that's one. The other piece, I think, is probably more relevant to more product managers, which is the state of mind of the mobile user. Again, to give some context, there are 2 billion apps in each of the app stores. And that means that customers have a lot of choice. The effort to abandon an app is very low, and many experiences give users dopamine hits that make the users come back to the app more frequently. And so I have a few principles that I'd like to share that how product managers can think about building mobile experiences that match this mental model.
That
The
sounds great.
easiest the easiest way I think to think about it is that great mobile design is effortless and delightful. Great mobile design should feel obvious in retrospect. And so talking about these principles, the first one that I can think about is essentially putting the customer in a flowing state of mind. Every time you press a button on a mobile device, you're taking someone to a new page where there is likelihood that either because of network latency or because of other reasons, it'll take time for that page to load. So
Yes.
if we can take away that mechanical context switching away from the customer and help them get into a flowing state of mind, it'll be a more fast and a fluid experience. And so how I think about that is that I would encourage product managers to think about how long it takes for a customer to complete an end-to-end task and not how long it takes for an individual page to load. It's that end-to-end task that should be fluid and fast. The other way that I like to think about that you also alluded to is that people are using their mobile phones when they're walking on the way to work, when they're waiting for the bus, when they have 15 seconds on the grocery store line. And so we have these small micro moments where customers do interact with their mobile phones. Industry says that people reach for their phones between 100 to 120 times a day. But many of those are just a handful of seconds because people didn't know what else to do. And so that's where also product managers should think about that how can you break the interactions into smaller self-contained shorter tasks so people can feel like within a few seconds they can make some progress. And I think a great example of that is Instagram, where you could interact with one image, like it, comment on it, and then you can leave the app and you can still feel like you accomplished something because you interacted with one self-contained experience. Another principle that I think is important is that in the world where people have so many choices and the effort required to flip an app is just double tapping on the home screen, you have to help the customer keep going. You can't you can't you can't make the customer reach any dead ends.
Right.
And so if the customer does confront with a dead end, they will leave the app altogether.
Right.
Another way that I like to think about that is that if a customer has already done a task, help them pick up from where they left off rather than having to redo it. So a lot of apps do this, that if you are scrolling a news feed and you leave the app and you come back, they'll actually leave you to where you left off and not to the top. And that's because you don't want to have to scroll down all over again. So decreasing the friction as much as possible to help you keep going.
This is great. I have to tell you something. These are terrific examples. When you talk about terms like these fluid experiences and micro moments, this is the essence where a product manager can capture the need at the point that the need becomes prevalent. And I think that there, you talk about this word of use the word network latency. Well, there's also research latency, meaning people do things, they try to do something, but the data that they end up gathering ends up being old very, very quickly because it's lagging. It doesn't really help people get ahead of the curve. And so, you're able to articulate these states. All right, and these fluid states, but there's got to be some research techniques that PMs could use so they can learn about those customer needs, especially with respect to mobile, because that is, mobile to me, and the reason this topic is so important, is a microcosm of what happens in a lot of the world. Not all product people are working on mobile apps, but it represents a place where we can place a magnifying glass to learn about the speed with which we need to make decisions about what to do, what not to do, and
Definitely.
how to understand what motivates a customer at that time. Because they always talk in these big pictures and very broad strokes, as if a persona is going to be persistent forever. And in fact, need states are not. They are incredibly transient, and you've proven that. So,
Definitely.
are there any resources that you can tell
Yes.
product managers
Yes.
about?
Yes. So, one of the saving grace or the privileges of mobile is that everyone is a mobile user.
Mm-hmm.
Mobile is something that has really transcended demographics, old people, young people, across the board, across the world. So
True.
that means that you can have a wealth of knowledge that you can tap into that that need not be any research that you do yourself. For example, I think something that I would really encourage product managers to do is to go out and read about the uh, essentially user psychology when it comes to mobile technology. Some of the very popular books that I've enjoyed, one, for example, is Hooked from Nir Eyal. He
Sure.
talks a lot about how to build habit forming products. Or Inspired by Marty Kagan is also another popular one, and also Design of Everyday Things by Dan Norman. And so these kind of talk about very high level psychology. And I think that's a very good place to start. Then the next layer that you can get into is qualitative interviews and reviewing app. If you have an app, then app review feedback. The qualitative interviews that I talk about is that you can go on the streets and talk to people about how they're using a particular device, how they use a particular use case on that device, for example, banking or e-commerce. And so and you'd be surprised that people on the street have excellent point of views, because these are people who are using their phones all day, every day. If you have an app, reviewing app store feedback can also be a goldmine for continuous customer feedback on what they think is working well, and more importantly, what are the friction that they're seeing in the app, something that I like to review very, very often.
I'll bet that's a really
And then the third one, which is really boots on the ground, is conducting usability, lightweight usability. And depending on the resources that the product managers have at their disposal, I highly suggest websites like usertesting.com, trymyui.com, that wherein product managers and UX designers can just upload wireframes and within a day at a very low cost understand if a handful of testers are being able to navigate the experience that they're talking about.
Is that like a crowdsourced UI, experimentation tool, or what?
It is. So actually, usertesting.com has testers that they pay, and so it is crowdsourced, but they have a very well trained group of testers to provide feedback.
Okay.
And so you do get high quality feedback. So how I would, if I can summarize that, thinking very high level about human psychology, going one layer deeper about observing people's behavior on the streets, talking to them, same with App Store reviews, and then third stage of getting very granular with what you're building with some usability testing on that.
Okay, that's great. So I have to say, and I am cognizant of our time and trying to keep this stuff framed. And from my point of view, this has been an extraordinarily informative conversation for product managers, because again, and to reinforce these points, that users are not the same all the time, that they are in different states of mind, and it's up to the product managers to track that like a radar screen, and to draw the insights that are necessary to make the appropriate changes. And as you've outlined, there's observation, there's these digital footprints that they may end up leaving, and these these user testing and looking at the reviews that give them the sense to triangulate this data so they can understand really what's motivating customers. But the last part is, and I think is really, really important, it's how can they anticipate what might happen next. And I think that is a great key. And that's a path, Kabir, that you have brought us to today. And so I'm gonna wind the show up, and thank you very much for the time that you spent Kabir, with us today, because again, it was just incredibly outstanding. And I hope our listeners will really appreciate some of the insights that you have. And so as I close up, I hope, again, this was a great episode for you to learn from. If you've got a topic you'd like me to discuss or interested in training, coaching, or other product management resources, really just reach out to me through the contact form at Sequent Learning Networks. And also make sure you're connecting with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I hope you'll tune in next time for Masters of Product Management. I'm Stephen Haynes. See you next time.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management with Stephen Haynes. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.